Hi everyone, welcome to the closing keynote of the DevEx Summit. With me, I have James from RedMonk. James, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience here?
Great, yeah. So James Governor, co-founder of a company called RedMonk. We're a research company, an industry analyst company, and we spend our time basically trying to understand developer, practitioner, and engineering-led technology adoption. So the cut and thrust of technology today, it doesn't just come from top-down purchasing. There are a lot of other influence effects in that, and yeah, we really focus on the tooling, the processes, and the approaches that the engineering teams are adopting.
So today we're going to talk about developer experience and the trends in developer experience, developer productivity. How does AI plays role into it? What's really happening? And I would think this is probably the golden time of developer experience, developer productivity. Like I've been in the developer tool space for quite some time.
Yep.
But I've not seen like the CEO level visibility or the board level visibility where the boards of companies are talking about developer experience, developer productivity. What do you think is changing? Is it because of AI?
Well, I mean, I think that AI is certainly a strategic imperative for companies, whether they be startups, whether they be enterprises. There is, frankly, 2025, there's pressure to cut costs, but also to deliver new things. I think the developer experience as a discipline, we've been through multiple generations of improving the developer experience. I mean, it goes back, if we think the sort of the transformative moment or a transformative moment would have been the arrival of Heroku on the scene. More latterly, we've seen very much that the companies that are most successful in tech are those that are providing a great developer experience. And investors have reacted accordingly. I mean, we now have any number of VC firms that are specifically focused on companies that offer a great developer experience. And at some point that becomes a board level concern. I think I talked about Heroku. Actually, Cloud Foundry in its day, along with Pivotal Labs, we began to see organizations like Comcast, for example, actually beginning to move more like a startup in terms of the number of production deploys per day and these sorts of things. And we began to see that up-leveling of developer experience as a board level and hopefully a CEO concern.
And I'm so glad that is happening. I've been promoting that we need to care about developer experience for like years and years and years, and now the awareness is higher and higher. We always talk to companies around if you are going to become a tech company, which every business is becoming, whether retailer or airline or bank or insurance company, they have thousands or tens of thousands of developers in most of the times. But people are like, why are we not moving as fast as Silicon Valley startups?
Yeah.
It's really the developer experience. The developer experience in a Silicon Valley startup is so much superior than than a normal enterprise company that's trying to become a technology forward software company. And unless you fix that, you're not going to get the innovation velocity, and the Silicon Valley startups will be much farther ahead.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think so. We've seen. I mean, I talked about the multiple generations. One is the emergence of platforms. Harness is one of them that are taking things that organizations would have built themselves, something like feature flags, and have made that a standard platform, something that the organization as a whole can adopt, and something that they don't need to maintain themselves. And I think if we look at where we are now as an industry, it is a period of standardization. There's been some sprawl, but certainly if we look at a Google, if we look at a Meta, they have a very clearly defined pipeline. They have a set of specific technologies, approaches that will be used by every developer in the organization, and that's why they can move and be more productive. And I think enterprises are now understanding that. We've had a bit of sprawl. Let the developers do what they want. And RedMonk may have been a bit guilty. We talked about developers as the new kingmakers. But the urge now is to really standardize across the organization so that we can move at scale across the org.
With the right degree of flexibility within some guardrails. Like what we see, so many of our customers for harness CI/CD, in many of these companies, they have 5,000 pipelines or 8,000 pipelines. And when you bring a modern platform, for which is a more flexible, templatized pipeline platform, like a harness kind of platform, you can bring it down to like 10 or 20 pipelines. We have companies like like large banks with like tens of thousands of developers, bring down from like 8,000 pipelines to 20 pipelines. And just the standardization and simplicity that comes with it, and all the developer toil that goes away, and the experience improves, is really, really amazing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's to your point. It was great that we focused on developer experience, but with that freedom of choice, you do begin to create some overheads. If they can use any language, if they can use any database, if they can have all of the choice, that creates both a cognitive overhead for the developer, but also an organizational management overhead for the organization. And I think at the moment, and this is where this platform engineering rubric is coming in, it's to get a handle on that, as you say.
So let's talk about I would say the hottest topic first, AI.
Yes.
When you talk about developer experience these days, that's really the number one thing. Like people
Absolutely.
talk about what role AI plays in developer experience, and how companies should think about it. What's your take on how much impact we have made on developer experience? Where are we on that journey?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that look, there are no aspects of IT infrastructure and the tools we use that are not going to be affected by AI. At the moment, obviously, generative AI is getting a lot of attention. We'd had Copilot, and then when ChatGPT hit, people could really see something, got very excited about it, that got sort of a consumer burst of attention. And we've seen these models just get more and more effective very, very quickly. I mean, if we think about in sort of art, you had the bad hands. Every time you tried to do a hand, it looked bad. Initially, some of the software, some of the code that was generated was like that. But honestly, the models, we think of something like Claude 3.5, really, really capable. And so, yeah, code gen has definitely been getting a lot of attention. And I think from our perspective, the really interesting thing there from a developer experience perspective is that everything is in play. So we had thought, and I'm sure Microsoft felt quite comfortable to say, great, we've got GitHub, we've got VS Code, this is going to be the platform for developers for the next 10 to 15 years. If you think about editors and developers, normally it's like a baby duckling. The first editor that a developer sees, they're going to use that for their career, VI, Emacs. But at the moment, having thought, okay, we were just going to see people using VS Code, and then along comes Cursor, and suddenly and that was a developer experience. They packaged up the model in such a way that developers were really excited by that. And then Cursor's like, okay, good, now we're creating a disruption. And then along comes Windsurf. So I think that what we're seeing is who is going to package AI the most effectively. And one of the things that's really important is it's got to be about the entire code base. It can't just be about a single file. We need to be thinking about the code base because, of course, development is a team sport.
Exactly. So the code base level, at the file level, at the function level, every level, the experience has to be done right there.
100%.
Yeah, I think it's exciting to see the developer experience improvement on the coding side of things. But a big part that I always look at as well is like what happens after coding. Like, now that developers get more productive in coding. And normally, if you talk to any organization, say like how much time developers spend in coding, and it's like maybe 30-40%. If you are really like a fast-moving tech startup kind of company, maybe 50-60% at most. The rest of the time goes into other things like testing, deployment, builds, all kind of things there. So there was this interesting data point from Dora's latest research.
I was about to go there.
That was such an interesting data point. Like the coding productivity went up 14%, but the software delivery volume went down 1.5%.
This is the first time that's happened. They've been in lockstep, and this was the point at which actually the generation of software got ahead of the skis. And you're absolutely right. The Dora report, the most recent one, it was very clear that actually it's not just about, look, we can generate a bunch of code. That's great. But what's more important is, can we get it into production? Can we make sure it's secure? Can we make sure that it scales? And we still need those engineering disciplines. A lot of people are talking about vibe coding at the moment. It's a lovely term. I don't really think that enterprises should be encouraging their developers to just do vibe coding. And here's why. Andrej Karpathy, when he put that forward as a way of talking, it literally said in his initial post, this is okay for something that you're doing on the weekend. I think someone that's a brilliant commentator on AI, it's called Simon Willison. And he was looking at vibe coding, and his point was, look, one of the things about vibe coding is you don't worry if you can't explain it. But you can't deploy software from an engineering perspective in the enterprise if you can't explain what it is that you built. That way madness lies.
Yeah. And you still are accountable for it. Like, you can, as an engineer, it's, if you write the code yourself, or we write the code through vibe coding or through, through a code generator. If you run in production, you have to have accountability around it.
100%.
And that needs for you to understand the code, what it's doing. It's just done the right way.
And so therefore, testing becomes ever more important. Monitoring, observability, ever more important. We need to be able to roll things back. We need to really understand what we're doing. So to me, code gen is the easy bit. The more important thing is, can we actually roll it out in production and rely on it?
100% agree. Like, that's what we have been evangelizing to the market. Like, code gen is great. It's increasing the developer productivity and will increase much more. Like, we are at 10% increase now. It will probably become 30%, 40%, 50%. But if you have the bottleneck in the rest of the process, testing, deployment, security, governance, all of that, you're not going to get the real results as an organization, and maybe the risk will even increase. Speaking of that, like you have been a big proponent of the concept of platform engineering and how the DevOps teams have evolved into a more up-level platform engineering kind of teams. What role they have to play in, and where do you think we are on the, of the maturity of platform engineering discipline?
Well, I mean, I think that here's the thing. Look, we are DevOps was a 20-year-old term, right? And organizations are still trying to get there. You can still have a conference, call it DevOps, and enterprises still are interested in that. It's a state that we need to get to. I think platform engineering, the key word there is platform. What I like about that is that in order to have a successful culture change, you need a platform and tooling. So one of the things DevOps people love to say was, it's a culture change. Or it's a culture change. And that sounds great. It's a culture change. But actually, platforms can drive a culture change.
Exactly. I'm so glad you said it. Like, that's sometimes you almost can pick a fight on this thing. Like, people tell you, like, oh, it's about culture. You change culture first. It's not about the tools. And tell them, like, you can't drive the culture change without the tools, because it's too hard to make a change.
I mean, are you really telling me that GitHub didn't change the way that people build software and didn't change the culture?
Exactly. Like, I many times, like, when we are, selling, say, our CI/CD for Harness, and people would, which is really like, instead of deploying every 2 weeks, can you deploy every day? Or can you deploy on demand? It's like, we need a culture change for it. It's like, culture change is only going to happen if you have a platform that can enable that daily deployment. Otherwise, no one is going to change the culture. So you've got to go hand in hand and use the tools and the platform.
100%. And we did this with business applications. If you're going to change the business of purchasing or the business of manufacturing, manufacturing resource planning or ERP, okay, we're going to have a culture change in how we do things, but you have a standard platform that enables the culture change.
Exactly. So, of course, there's a big evolution of the internal developer platforms, IDPs, over the last many years. You have talked a lot about it. We see that in many organizations, people are adopting IDPs. At Harness, we have a very strong IDP product that people are using, but we still see kind of early in the platform engineering teams are trying to bring in this kind of IDP kind of discipline, but the developer teams adopting it sometimes could be challenging. What's your take on, like, how do we improve that?
Yeah, I mean, like anything else, at the moment we are, like anything in tech, initially you see a lot of flowers, blooming, and people get excited about things. Backstage is obviously a very good example. Everybody's like, oh, the Spotify model. And, to this point, we could have a platform that enabled us to do things in a more Spotify-like way. That sounds great. But of course, Spotify actually did have a culture in place that was ready for that. They also had a service model in place that was ready for that. And I do think that at the moment, we got rather too excited about the notion of the portal without really having the platform standardized underneath it. And I think in order to be successful with something that where developers can come in and make that the first port of call for their daily work, you need much more than just the front end. You do need to be thinking about everything that goes behind that. And that's I think that's a bit what we're missing. And that's the kind of thing where developers, if it doesn't truly tie into their work, they're just going to go around it.
So and it has to add value to the developers.
100%.
Which is it has to be accurate, the service discovery, the service
IDP
catalogs.
without developer experience is not going to be adopted.
And the purpose of IDP is to improve developer experience. So you have to focus on that first, like, what this, and sometimes, like, things that developers are frustrated about, like doing things that day-to-day things that they don't want to do again and again. Can you have automation around it and workflows around it to drive the adoption of IDPs?
And of course, I think that's where AI is such a great opportunity. So we think some of the things that developers find boring, if we think about just dealing the cut and thrust of dealing with issues, documenting what we're doing, I'm not saying that we should replace developers in that, but certainly it can augment the work that they're doing. And I think that's a great opportunity to enrich the IDP using AI so that developers are able to feel productive. And that's where I think, honestly, I really feel that developer experience and AI are inextricably linked.
Exactly. And a lot of the toil that developers have to do, if you remove that, the experience gets better. And the toil, AI agents are pretty powerful in doing that. We at Harness, we have been rolling out a lot of AI agents for DevOps, for QA, for FinOps, for infrastructure as code, for feature flags rollout, which is really, we look at what are the top 5 things a DevOps engineer normally does. Which is like create pipelines, edit pipelines, troubleshoot a build failure, deployment failure, make sure things are compliant.
Yep.
Can you have an agent help through most of those things? It's not going to replace, but it increases the the productivity there. It removes the toil, so your experience gets better.
Well, look, DevOps was always about automation.
Yes.
We can't be afraid of automation, and AI is really automation.
AI is really automation. That's a lot of the promise of AI is driving intelligent automation. Without automation, we're not gonna fully get there.
What are we here for?
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about another emerging trend, or for the last many years, progressive delivery.
Yeah,
I heard you are writing a book about it. So we'll love to hear your take on it.
It's taken a while to get there, but yeah. So progressive delivery. What we were looking at was. There's no doubt that CI/CD pushed us forward as an industry. That was great work that made us all, frankly, as organizations, better at writing software. The work done in codifying and helping people to understand how they could write more effective software, absolutely fantastic. On the other hand, a lot of those core principles were before the cloud. And the idea that a few things. A, the automation capabilities in the cloud are so far ahead of where we were. The abundance of the cloud and the abundance with ephemerality of the cloud. Historically, if we were going to do something, blue-green deployments, it was literally we had to have 2 identical infrastructures and we needed to spend accordingly. For a lot of organizations, that's kind of scary.
It's expensive, yeah.
Think about virtualization began to make that easier. The cloud certainly pushed that forward. And now with containers, I can spin up 5 instances. I can really begin with this abundance and the automation we've got in place, begin to think about, let's experiment. Let's do, and canarying is something that is so useful. Feature flags is another one. Why can't we just have a cohort of users use the product, understand what their experience is like, and that can be in 2 ways. One is no breaking changes. Obviously, we need to make sure that it's stable, it's scalable. But the other one is moving into what is their experience like? Do they like this? Maybe even put them in charge. Google did this back in the day with Google Labs. When you were using their email products, it was up to you as the user whether you were ready for the new stuff. Because different organizations, different users are ready to move at different paces. So progressive delivery is about getting the right product to the right user at the right time with that set of disciplines, feature flags, dark launches, canarying, all of that. And so, where the book comes out in November, and hopefully it'll be well received.
Well, that's it's great to get more and more awareness about it. At Harness, we have been at the forefront of that, canary deployments. For
you didn't even tell me. I came up with the term progressive delivery, and then one day Harness is delivering a platform to do it. That was amazing.
See, that someone has to bring the practice into a tool chain and a solution that makes it easy. Like canary deployments, for example. it's a great concept. It's been around for so long, but people are still struggling to make it really happen. Like it's hard to make it happen. So when Harness was started, like that was one of our signature feature that we brought to the market, and our mascot became a canary bird. If you see, probably you can we should bring it here, a canary bird. And no one knew about canary deployments for a long time. See, that's our and people say, why?
Awesome.
What kind of chicken do you have or something?
I'll take that with me when I leave. There's no doubt. That's mine now.
Because this is such a powerful practice, and people just don't do it.
Yep.
Last year CrowdStrike outage happened. Which is like if you think about it, like it's really a failure in not doing progressive delivery, not doing canary deployments, not doing feature flags, not doing rollouts.
Sonos is another one. Yes, I mean, that's practically bringing the company down. A byword for great customer experience, because they didn't really think about the progressive delivery approach. They hadn't packaged that up. They've really hurt themselves.
And at Harness, we are big proponent of that. Is how you reduce the risk on everything. But you have to make it easy. We have to give the right tool chain to people, to the industry.
Culture change requires a platform to underpin that.
You need canary deployments, you need feature flags, you need experiments.
Make it easy for the developer, great developer experience, and then we can actually move forward.
Yeah, definitely. So that's great to hear. Let's talk about the another topic, which when I talk to developers in large enterprises about developer experience, and they say, why is your experience so bad, and why are you complaining about experience all the time compared to say other companies? And say the thing that keeps coming in again and again is security and governance. That because we are in a regulated business, we have the governance rules that makes it so complicated for us in our experience.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you balance the developer experience with security and governance?
I mean, I think one of the things is that we talked about. So we having shifted testing left, it seemed natural. Oh, great! Now we're going to shift security left. That sounds good. But one of the problems is that if what you're actually doing is shifting the need to document a lot more about what you're doing in terms of security. If you've got very separate processes in terms of the security team being separate, and I think this is still one of the big challenges, and it's understandable why security teams naturally want to put the brakes on. It's like historically the DBA. Everyone hated the DBA because they didn't want it. They didn't want change. The application wants change, and I think security, that's a similar sort of tension. But yeah, I mean, I think that if we think about the inner loop, building the application. There is we really haven't pushed security into the inner loop. It still feels like a bolt-on. And so it's if you create toil for developers, they kind of don't want to do it. The tick lists aren't so good. So I think that's still an area where ensuring the developer experience is right, so that when the developers are writing the code, how can you prevent them in the pipeline, for example, or even before that, to because we're going to ask questions about, and we're moving forward as an industry, secrets management, right? Or rather, not having secrets in the code that we write. Make sure that that you don't have keys in your repos. That's something that we can automate, but we haven't always done so. What are we going to do? Always ask the developer to go and read through every line? I mean, we should. But that happens again and again. So I think that the extent to which we can begin to ameliorate those concerns by saying, because also, we're already asking developers to do a lot. And then we're going to say, oh, even more. You have to absolutely understand everything to do with the buffer overrun or a SQL injection. So I think, again, this is an opportunity for automation, but it needs to not get in the way of the developer. And at the moment, we're not there yet as an industry.
We're definitely not there. And we see that as a problem. And many of our customers that we are helping with is we are really strongly advocating that you got to automate the security controls in the pipelines. So most of the time the friction is developers are security teams ran the scans later on, and now I need to deal with vulnerabilities, and this vulnerability I don't even understand. It's not real. This is how do I prioritize? All of this kind of the back and forth going on there. And the security teams are complaining developers don't follow the right scans. They don't they push out things with vulnerabilities, or and we want to enforce they do the right things. What we are advocating is why don't you bring all the controls inside fully automated in the pipeline? Developer writes code, you go it runs a basic scan, you get the vulnerabilities, you explain what the vulnerability is about, suggest a fix with AI, and maybe they can just do a PR and fix it. That's, we are in our CI, you can, some area like that you can do. Then when you're rolling out, things, then you can enforce in with OPA policies and all, which is what the security teams can control, all the checks and balances. We have one large bank where there are 200-page manual of code going from, they were like the top 5 bank in the world, so they had a high degree of regulations. Like a developer writes code, and then it's like, you have to follow all of these things before code goes in production to make sure you're completely meeting all the compliance things. And then at some point, the frustration level was so high that it just was completely messing up the developer experience. And now they have taken all of this and all the 200-page manual, they're fully automated in there. So it's like, yes, you're going through all these checks, but if you pass all the checks in 8 minutes, you are there in live in production. If you fail some check, then you have some kind of approval kind of thing.
Some of it is to do with, you mentioned regulated industries. I mean, obviously, regulation has lagged behind. I mean, we had, you've got, and saw the same thing in automotive companies in Europe. We've seen the same thing in pharma, where regulators would be saying things like, you need to take a screenshot and put it in a PDF file of every change or something like this. That's not developers. I mean, that's a regulatory issue.
That's a regulatory issue, and I hopefully we can fix the regulatory people to be more. But let's say if that is the regulatory requirement, I would say if you want to improve the developer experience, just take that process and automate it. Like taking the screenshot of every file and put it into the PDF and sending it to someone. Let's just automate inside the pipeline. Like every time you make a file code change, there should be a job that does it, and so now developers don't have to worry about it. It doesn't hurt their experience. So good degree of automation, can remove a lot of the toil around it.
100%.
Which unfortunately we see like so much of the toil comes from that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, and that's it's all of those paper cuts, and that's where automation comes in, and the pipeline is a great opportunity to do that.
So speaking of the last topic in developer experience here, for a long time in developer experience world, there is no measurability, no metrics. Like when we say, okay, are we improving developer experience? So normally you improve something, you start with, okay, what's the current metric and what's the future metric? There's been debate on like you can't measure developers or can't measure developer productivity because it's not really there's a creative artistic element to it. But now you're starting to see the change, it's like people talk about, how more productive people are with AI as a developer, but how much productive they were before, do we know? So it's like, how do you measure it? How do you measure before and after? So what are you seeing in the trends around measurability and metrics? And,
so there's a few things. I think one, it's really difficult if you don't have a baseline. And I think the baseline needs to include some standardization. So if you've got an organization where lots of different development teams are using different tool sets and so on, it's really hard to actually know what's an organizational baseline. So organizations, I think, that are becoming more effective in understanding how their state of the art is moving forward, it's because they've done standardization work already. You mentioned the DORA report, very helpful. We've also got Dr. Nicole Forsgren now has the SPACE framework, which is quite useful. One really interesting organization at the moment is the Developer Success Lab, Dr. Kat Hicks. And they take a very multidisciplinary approach to understanding developers and their productivity, where they're not just talking about MTTR or something like that. They do survey. They do understand, if you're going to have a good developer experience, then we actually have to think about how it feels to be using the tools. And so they bring in some psychology, certainly their work around AI adoption. So some organizations are very challenged and afraid to adopt AI. It turns out that those are the ones that have that sort of adversarial culture where learning is something that people hold really close to their chest. And I'm the best. The organizations that are not so scared of AI are the ones that have a learning collaborative culture already, where it's not about, I don't know if I could swear in this, but it's not about the brilliant asshole. It's about working together. Those organizations that already have a collaboration culture are finding it better to adopt better adoption of AI. So I think that What we don't want to do is reinvent the wheel. Those are three. We look at space, we look at Dora, we look at the kind of work that the Developer Success Lab is doing. Those are all helpful frameworks. I mean, we should understand how many production deploys a day we should do. We should understand what is our mean time to recovery. These are at least proxies. They're useful, and I do think that that's some work that as an industry are worth paying attention
to. I do think we have to measure and because that's the baseline to improve from. And sometimes it's hard to track these metrics and get the data if the complexity of if you ask a simple question on what's your lead time to for a change. And you think it's such a simple answer, 1,000% development team will know right away, and it can take a 3-month project to get the data, of what is the and that, Harness as we built a product a few years ago to solve that. How do we make it easy to get all this data?
Okay.
You want Dora metrics, space metrics, can you get them in a dashboard all the time, reliably across a lot of different teams? But what we started to see after that though is people say, okay, Dora metric is the outcome metric.
Yeah.
But what builds up to it? I see my lead time to recover is, my mean time to recover is bad, or my lead time to change is bad, or my deployment frequency is not there, or you can do it by different teams. But how do I improve it? How do I fix it? So then they start the next level. Then we started to see is okay, you got to break out what happens that builds up to it, your change your lead time. You cannot reduce it until you know where the time is being spent. Is it waiting for builds? Is it waiting for deployments? Is it manual work around governance? Well,
I think that's one of the beauties again of an integrated platform. So if you've got lots and lots of different tools, all with their own metadata that isn't integrated, so that you can't actually understand, because developers are using lots and lots of tools in a day. Where are they spending their time? As you say, in order to understand those bottlenecks, making them more productive. It's very helpful to bring that data together. And again, that's one of the things that successful organizations are doing. I just keep coming back to that standardization in order to succeed.
Yeah, makes sense. So we covered a lot of topics, today on the trends in developer experience. AI for coding, vibe coding, AI for how do we bring the rest of the non-coding task and bring AI and automation to that. We covered platform engineering, IDPs, as a trend that's still getting stronger and stronger. We covered security and governance. How do we bring that? We talked about progressive delivery. We talked about how do we what was the last topic we talked about here? Measurability and metrics.
Measurability and metrics, always important.
So, now if you have to give advice to the audience here, trying to improve developer experience and increasing developer productivity, what are the top few things you would say, focus on?
I think that it is a difficult time. There's no doubt that if we look at all organizations are feeling under a lot of pressure. There is a feeling that this regaining control is super important. But the bottom line is that we're going to need developers to build great experiences for our users and for our customers. And so we're really not going to just replace them all with AI. I mean, it's kind of a nice dream. But as we've seen in numerous areas, I mean, even just something like customer service, organizations say they're going to replace everything with AI, and then they turn around and actually, that didn't work so well. We're investing in phone customer service. We've seen at least one large e-commerce platform, they fired all of their technical writers saying, oh, we can do this with AI. It turned out being AI slop, and they saw their developer satisfaction fall. And so I think that the key here is, look, developer experience is important. And organizations, they do need to gain some control. They do need to automate. But the successful organizations are going to be those that do have standards so that they can measure. And they are, I think, at base level, I mean, this is a summit about developer experience. That's because the developers matter. And that's my advocacy position, and that's what we say in the industry. And so, really thinking about your job is to make your developers more successful so that they can build the best digital services for your customers.
Well said. AI is here to improve the developer experience, not take away the developer jobs. I'm in that same camp. It's the human appetite for innovation and what we can do with technology and software is so high.
There's no shortage of work to do.
Yes,
there's a lot of work to do. All of your customers have a big backlog, right?
Exactly, right? That's what we feel like. I've never met someone who's like, I don't have enough things in my backlog. And so we will need more and more developers probably, but the developers need to get a better experience, be more productive. And this is a great time to be. Like, we are having conversations at every level around developer experience. People are investing in developer experience. AI is a big boon there. So that's
invest in platform, invest in AI, and invest in people.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us here today, and thank you everyone for joining this session.